2010 Sonata has a steering clunk issue. A lot of you might have seen there's a TSB on this. Motor driven power steering, MDPS, nylon gear, and all these different, you can go through this list and it's quite extensive to pull the column and to do all these nutty things that I don't think are necessary. Probably a good idea to disconnect the battery, although it's not mandatory. But do this at your own risk. I assume no liability. I dropped the column in this manner. Upper plastic cover came off. There's one bolt inverted through the bottom cover up through the top cover. So get under there, drop your, it's either going to be a Phillips or a Torx. Pop your upper cover, 4 bolts, 2 fronter studs, and nuts. You see the stud here? And then in the back you're going to have your bolts. They look like this. Longer bolts in the back and the nuts in the front. It's 12 millimeter. It's simple. Just get an extension, and if you have either a 3/8 air gun, a small air gun, or battery powered, a 1/4 inch 3/8 will work. You don't need half. Take your long extension and socket and just push in on the lower cover. Boom. That's your front 2 nuts. Okay, so you don't have to start ripping. You don't have to take the lower column, the switches, the airbag, and the steering wheel. Don't touch that crap. Don't take your fuse box out. Everybody's like, oh, take the fuse box. No, you don't have to. Then in the back, you got your bolts. You drop them. The only tricky part, it's not even that tricky, is I had to push my seat. First of all, put your seat all the way back. I have a power seat. And then I had to push my cover, because the geometry of the wheel, if I were to lift up this wheel, it's going to get close to the seat. So I had to pry it past the seat to drop it. Did not disconnect harnesses. Now, here's the thing. The gear that goes bad sits between, here's your power steering motor. Look, just a friggin' motor. It's got 3 bolts in it. It's not rocket science. You got a big old electric motor that sits on top of your steering column. So when you turn the steering wheel, this motor powers the column. That's your power assist. There's no hydraulics in this car. So I took the 3 bolts out. They're T30 Torx. There's 1. There's 2. The third one's in the back. It's a little tricky. You got to get up underneath here and get something like this, 1/4 inch drive, T30, and you're going to have to work it that way. Drop the pump back, and the gear is right here. Okay, to illustrate further, I lit us up a little better. I leaned the motor back, the motor pivots back. Here's your bad gear. This is an interface gear. Realize that this is not the gear, it's a gear. And what it does, if you look, it's all chewed up, it's all soft rubber or polyurethane, because according to Hyundai, they use both styles. They have a rubber gear and a urethane gear. But if I peel this out of here, okay, just get a hold of it. That's it. You got your metal 4-spoke gear, part of the motor, and now you got this little plastic piece of crap that obviously went bad. All right, look, it's all pounded to shit. And if you look in what I'm going to call the cup of the column, I'm going to call this the cup. All right, there's going to be all kinds of garbage in there, debris. Either use a vacuum, if you have a vacuum cleaner at home, suck out all the particles inside this bowl. All right, I'm trying to get in here to point, but everything in here, you got to suck it out with a vacuum, or you got to use compressed air and blow it out. Get all the particulate out of there. Then you're going to mount your new gear into the cup or into the motor. Either way is probably acceptable. They have to interface, and you're going to drop that motor in with 3 bolts, lift your column up, 2 bolts in the back, 2 studs in the front, get your plastic cover up on top. I'll bet you, if you have your crap together, this entire job, literally, I'm not making this up, you could, hood up in the shop, take the battery cables off. This whole job could be done easily in 30, 40 minutes. Very, very easily. Thank you. And there you go. It lays in there real nice. You see, the metal spokes are here, and here's your nylon. It just has to drop, it'll drop right in. The orientation doesn't matter. It could only drop in, you know, in between the spokes of the metal. So once you get that in, now we're gonna flip the motor and get that going. All right, so I got the motor seated, but there is a trick to this. When you go to lay the motor down, you see how okay, let me give you an example. So you see the interface where the bolts go. Notice how I can pivot this and they're flush. These have to be flush. Do not force the motor down with the bolts, okay? If this doesn't drop in by hand, things are not lined up. One trick is grab the steering wheel, which is pretty much centered up anyway. See the Hyundai emblem? I didn't want to take this apart. Just rock it back and forth gently and rock your motor back and forth gently, and eventually these gears are going to hook up. The rule is on the steel driven gear and the steel receptacle gear, the nylon's in the middle, or plastic or rubber, whatever the fuck you want to call that shitty gear that fails. It's got to be one spoke of metal and then nylon and then metal and then nylon. That's how they interface. That's the only way these two come together, okay? Every other gear has to be nylon. And I'm calling it nylon, but I think it's rubber or urethane is really what it is. And then once you do this, your bolts that hold the motor in, they actually come in from the top. See that? T30. Screw this down from the top. I'm doing this by hand. Very, very, very simple, really. The other bolt's right here. The only hard bolt to get the motor out is in the back. And like I said before, come up from underneath, or above the brake pedal, come up from the back side on the left, and you're gonna get that rear bolt. And once you do this, you lift this column up, you screw in your 4 studs, get your plastic covers on, put your battery cable on, you're done. There is a hook here, and this hook is designed to go up into this window. So when you raise the column, it kind of hooks in, and it aids you in installing. So when you hook it in, you could get your bolts in. This is not, again, rocket science. Now, the last thing is you might have to do a steering sensor adjustment on a scanner if you don't keep things lined up very well. That would be something done on a scan tool. It's basically your steering inclination sensor. It's not that hard to do. A lot of shops have those scanners, and what it does, it trues up the sensor to the steering motor and the column to make sure everything's center lined. So when your steering wheel's straight, the car knows this for purposes of traction control and ABS and all that good stuff. So that would be the worst case scenario. Just remember, if you drop the motor back, don't turn the gear on the motor. Do not turn the gear inside the column. Don't turn the gears all over the place, and you probably do not need to have a calibration done on the steering column. All right? Thank you. And like I said, this is probably a 40-minute job, but for an average person, it might take you an hour and a half or 2 hours, but still, you're saving yourself some effort going to a shop that's going to charge you a lot of money. Thank you. All right, column's up, 4 bolts tightened. I'm just trying to make this as... Listen, if you can't take plastic covers off a column and drop it, you shouldn't be doing this job. I'm just letting you guys know. No insults. I've been doing this 30 years. I'm a professional mechanic. This is not a side job. This is my day job. So lower the column with this lever. You could pivot the column. Let the column drop, and then you're going to insert your upper panel. Goes up over the switches. This basically just clicks in. It's very simple. And there's there was like literally one Torx bit that goes through the bottom here, and it holds the upper column cover to the lower. Once that's done, you're literally putting in the knee pad bolstering, which is just a steel shield, and there's 4 10 mil bolts holding in the steel panel, which is right here. All right, and then after that, you're putting trim in. That's it. So basically, you're taking your knee bolster trim out and the steel panel, leave the fuse box alone. Be clever, take the upper column cover off, leave the lower one on, drop the 4 bolts, drop the column past the seat. Trust me, I'm giving you the easiest way you could do this. It could be a lot harder. And And that's pretty much it. It's not rocket science. And like I said, no offense, but if you're not mechanically inclined to even take a knee bolster off, why would you be doing this job? You wouldn't be. So this is just a bonus. I don't need to be showing you knee bolsters and stupid brackets. That's nonsense. If you want to know how to put a gear into this power steering motor, which is electric, it's the motor driven power steering system, MDPS, and that's it. Thank you. Okay, all back together. Hyundai, see, nice and quiet. Turning the wheel. Nothing. Okay, so 72,188 is the mileage. That's not very much mileage for that gear to get chewed, but it does. Again, keep it simple, folks. I'm not ever trying to be a ball buster. Been doing this 30 plus years. I know what I'm doing. The upper cover could come off of here because there's one bolt inverted underneath, and then just drop your friggin' column. Take your bolster out under your knees here. Do not make it complicated. Do not remove the fuse box. Don't start taking half the car apart. I think for safety's sake, it's probably a good idea to disconnect the battery just to make sure, God forbid, a hot lead touches ground somewhere and you short something out. Other than that, that's it. Thank you.